So welcome everyone. Thank you for being here for this presentation, The Bite-Sized Science of Whole Foods for Exercise Recovery with Dana Angelo White. If you have any questions during this presentation, please enter them in the question box and they will be added to the queue. We'll answer those at the end of the presentation. Ideas now, pleased to welcome Dana White. Dana is a registered dietitian nutritionist, certified athletic trainer, journalist, nutrition and fitness consultant, and author of 9 cookbooks. She is a sports dietitian and clinical professor of athletic training and sports medicine at Quinnipiac University in Connecticut. She has been practicing as a dual credentialed clinician for over 15 years. Dana is also involved in several research projects and publications covering topics including eating disorders in sport, professional nutrition practice, culinary medicine, and dietary supplement safety in sports medicine. Please welcome Dana White.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for that intro. I am so happy to be here with you today to talk about one of my favorite sports nutrition topics. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen so that you can see everything that's going on there. Please make sure, the webinar universe sometimes feels lonely for the presenter. So please make sure you're putting questions into the Q&A, comments into the chat. My wonderful moderator will be helping along. And as we go throughout this presentation, we are going to also launch some polls. There's a little bit of math. So if you want to have your calculator, please do not disconnect now that I said math, but going to be a little bit of math in here today as well. So if you have a calculator or your calculator on your phone handy, definitely have that nearby. You got all my background there. I very much in that intro. Maybe the only thing left out was that I'm a pizza lover and a mom of 3. And I really try to translate nutrition in terms of whole foods, which is going to be the focus of our talk today. And a quick disclosure, I am here on behalf of the Almond Board of California, such a wonderful partner, and I'm excited to share some very interesting science about almonds and other sports nutrition related topics here with you today. So a sort of loose table of contents for the ride that we are going to go on for the next hour or so today. We are going to talk about recovery in terms of physical fitness and sports nutrition. My majority of my patient population is collegiate and professional athletes, but I really want to draw that out to a much wider spectrum of all people that participate in physical activity and fitness, and really show how these guidelines for recovery can really be adjusted for whatever sort of client that you are used to working with. We are going to also really try to define recovery. I think we use that word a lot in the sports nutrition world, but a lot of people don't really understand what it means. So we're going to spend some time defining what recovery actually means. We're going to talk about protein and carbohydrates and antioxidants in terms of whole foods, and talk about some benchmarks and really some number driven criteria for what you can, so that you can take that back to the clients that you work with. That's where the math comes in a little bit, but it won't be hard, I promise. And then we're going to discuss some practical ways to really optimize those recovery processes with whole foods. And, the athletic trainer and registered dietitian in me basically means I'm a science geek. So I have lots of good research and references to share with you. So before we go any further, we're going to launch our first poll. They have a few polls that I'll be sharing with you throughout the presentation. So we're going to go ahead and launch our first poll, which is this: what are you most interested in learning about overall exercise recovery for your clients? So you have to pick one. So I feel like some of you might want more than that, but strategies for proper exercise recovery, how nutrition can aid in recovery, research on what supports recovery from exercise, all of the above. So go ahead and make a selection there. And then I wish I could vote. It says here that hosts and panelists can't vote. I would probably vote all of the above, but that's just me. So once you all have a chance to weigh in, I'm going to have Sarah share the results, and then we can take a look at kind of what you're interested in learning about today. Okay. Well, it looks like I can't see your results, so hopefully you can see them. P.S. We're going to cover all of these things today, hopefully you selected all the above. Okay, there we go. All right, I couldn't see it at first, but it looks like 54% of you are looking for all of the above, which is perfect because that's what we're going to talk about today. On we go. So, just as a starting off point, what are really the goals of sports nutrition? And again, you can really apply this no matter how, whether you're dealing with, a population that doesn't really, it's just really starting their fitness journey, or even someone high level who participates in regular physical activity, even high up to, really elite athletes. So, what are we trying to achieve in sports nutrition? My hit list involves this: fueling performance, meeting nutrient needs, making sure that we're not missing out on anything, because missing out even on one thing means could lead to deficits in performance. We want to prevent injury and illness. And this is something I feel like there's a disconnect sometimes, and maybe people don't think about the way they fuel is directly impacting their risk of injury. And, if I ever ask anyone, would you like to be injured? Would you like to be sick? Obviously, almost always they say no. And really understanding that how we fuel for exercise can have a significant impact on that. Of course, we want to make gains in strength and endurance. We want to properly recover from exercise, which will be our focus today. And that additional, again, reminder that this is not just for competitive athletes. So, something else I really try to hit home when we think about fueling exercise and certainly recovering from exercise is that, if you think, what is the most, what happens if you don't eat enough? What happens if you don't fuel exercise, right? If we just start there, I think most commonly the answers I get is, oh, well, I'm tired. Or maybe I don't perform well. Maybe I have a bad workout. Maybe we go as far to say, oh, maybe I have a headache and I feel sluggish, or something along those lines. And absolutely, those are really the acute impacts of not fueling your workouts properly, not eating well before, maybe not recovering well the day before. But I want to take that a step further, and this study by Logue really, I think, represents that well. Is that really looking at, okay, if we are sort of chronically underfueling our workouts, if we are consistently skipping our recovery, we see those deficits head to toe. So it's not just like, yeah, you feel tired that day and maybe you didn't get the most out of your workout, you were sort of lazy going through the motions. We start to see deficits. Really, the body breaks down and we see deficits in cognitive performance, cardiovascular health, bone health. We see GI disturbances. So the gut health, really, I mean, that's a whole other webinar, but gut health really takes a hit there. And that is then related to a decrease in immune function, which leads to that I don't want to get sick thing. And then, of course, reproductive health, hormone production, and a lot of those hormones drive things like muscle protein synthesis, right? So it's really, there's this acute impact. I'm going to feel like, garbage today in my workout, but the long-term effects are a lot more detrimental. So here's where we start defining recovery, right? So, what are we recovering really? And I really like this study by Bonilla. Again, I will share my references with you at the end. But this idea, this particular paper defines it as the 4 R's. So it says, okay, we are going to rehydrate, refuel, repair, and rest. All of which are really important in optimizing athletic performance. And I'm just kind of taking a step further over here is something that I try to point out is the repair that's taking place as part of the recovery process. When we exercise, we damage healthy tissues. We damage our cells, especially our muscle cells. And that sounds, I don't mean injured, I just mean damage. There's a normal function of exercise and training. We're going to damage those cells. So that damage needs to be repaired post workout to really prepare for the next exercise session. So normal damage is going to occur. We are going to be expending energy that needs to be replenished, and there's going to be some inflammation, and we want to take steps to reduce that. And good recovery practices can help facilitate that. So what do we need for recovery? We need a lot of things, probably including a few extra hours in the day, but I'm going to make sure that we come up with some really tangible, practical, fast, and efficient ways to recover from our workouts. But really, if we look at the nuts and bolts from a nutrient perspective, protein, carbs, antioxidants, fluid, and electrolytes are really the top five nutrients that we are trying to make sure we deliver as part of the recovery process. And for today, we are going to focus on the top three here: carbs, carbs, and antioxidants. I probably will sneak in a few, discussion about fluid and electrolytes because I cannot help myself. But we're going to focus on this three for the most part here today. So first up, we're gonna talk about protein. So just some straight up facts looking from the US dietary guidelines, and as we can see, protein recommendations will vary throughout the life cycle, but still, even if we're looking at, women 31 to 59, that's a pretty big window. Same thing for men, but basically we're looking at sort of childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and then some later years in life. And I truthfully think that sometimes these recommendations are a little bit daunting or hard to interpret, because when you see like 5 to 6 equivalents or 7 to equivalents, I mean, it might seem, oh, well, I could never eat that much, I could never get there. But really, if we look on the other side here of the slide, looking at what counts as that protein equivalent, it's really not that much, right? And this is not a recommendation. I'm not saying just have an ounce of meat or a half of ounce of nuts and seeds and things like that. It's really, this is what we use in terms to scale it, right? So in most cases, we're going to be looking at, an ounce of nuts or seeds, or maybe 2 ounces in some cases, certainly more than an ounce of meat. But this is really what the scale is based on. And then you adjust it based on, gender and age range and things like that. But we are going to take this several steps further, looking at, how can we apply this to active individuals and the clients that we work with. So protein needs, there is all kinds of data out there, all kinds of actually also bad myths out there circulating about, well, how much protein do people need? So let's start with what the facts tell us, right? So if we look at, and really, most of the literature is going to look at protein and most of the macronutrients really in terms of percent of total calories or a measurement based on someone's body weight. So I'm going to show you both here and give you some perspective, and again, based on the client population you work with, some might be better to execute or make more sense than others. But somewhere in the range of 10 to 35% of total caloric intake is considered appropriate for protein intake. Once you get above 35%, then it's probably too much for most people. But that is a pretty broad range. Typically, certainly if I'm working with an athlete or a client one-on-one, I might focus more on weight as my scale. So what is their body weight? And then I can use that to make the proper determination. The RDA is really the minimum for an adult is 0.8 grams per kilogram per day. Dietitians love the metric system. So we'll look at some conversions in a minute, but that's what is considered a safe and acceptable amount of protein to just meet your needs. It's kind of like the baseline. And certainly for an active population, we are going to increase from that, right? If muscle, maintenance or muscle building is a goal, we're certainly going to need to go higher than that for most active individuals. So, but just to give you a perspective, that 0.8 grams per kilogram per day is about 55 grams per day total for a 50-pound person. And some of you might be like, that seems really low. And it is and it isn't, right? Again, it's based on good data to say this is what we need in order to maintain health. But if we're trying to increase some goals to maintain, to build muscle, we're going to go up from that. So to give you some other ranges for a more active population, I think we're going to look somewhere more between 1.2 and 2.2 grams per kilogram per day. So, and if we're really trying to maximize those anabolic processes in terms of muscle building, we're going to look somewhere more in the 1.7 to 2.4. You will have some outliers outside of this, but I think this is the safe place to say we have good, really good, reliable data. And then we also want to think about how we eat these protein rich foods, right? So numbers are great, but we have to also think about how we execute them in terms of the individual that we're talking about. And for example, if we are dealing with a certain type of athlete, a more endurance focused athlete, maybe we want to be a little bit lower on the protein scale because we have to be more generous with carbohydrate because they have a race coming up, right? Versus a more strength focused athlete, which has a lessened cardiovascular component to their training or maybe their phase of training, and muscle building is really our goal and strength training is going to be more plentiful, and then maybe in those cases we might be a little bit more generous with our protein allotment, right? So it's never set in stone, but again, these numbers are great and we need these numbers, but then we have to think about how we execute this in terms of food and recommendations. If we look across the life cycle, there's other things that need to be considered: cardiovascular health, kidney function. If you have a client with compromised kidney function, we have to be more conservative with protein intake. If they're injured, if they have dental health issues that might limit their intake of certain types of protein, what is their access to food? I work on a college campus, and I could recommend these certain protein rich foods. If they're not in the cafeteria and my student athlete is on a meal plan, then they might not be able to get them. So you have to really think about the logistics that surround the recommendations that we're making. All right, so here we're going to do a little math, totally optional. But this is really a worksheet that I might use to start making some thoughts about what my clients might need. I recommend to just do this for yourself, just to give yourself some perspective of what this might look like. And here I'm using the 1.2 to 2.2 grams per kilo as a range. So take your body weight, divide it by 2.2 to figure out what your kilogram body weight is. And then I suggest even just doing it by that range just to see, because I think that 1.2 to 2.2 scale creates a wider range than some people might think. And then we think about, okay, so we figured out how much protein total this person is going to require in a day. Then we're going to think about how to distribute it, right? So I always like to provide a little cheat sheet where, here's some examples. Again, not saying you should only have this isolated amount of this protein rich food, but here's how much protein it provides, right? And then we decide, okay, well, maybe we are going to increase that, maybe we're going to decrease that. Again, in most cases, based on what's here, we're probably going to go up from that. But this, because a lot of protein whole foods don't always have an easily accessible food label, it's nice to be able to provide something like this where they can see, okay, great, oh, 23 almonds, 6 grams, done. And then we say about timing, right? So again, that recovery piece, recovery really does rely on a nice delivered dose of protein right after a workout. So I usually target somewhere between 25 to 30 grams of protein is what I would recommend, along with some of our other components, which we are going to look at shortly, and make sure we're sort of getting that delivered for our post-workout meal. And then let's distribute the remaining amount of protein throughout the day, throughout our other meals and snacks. And that's where it comes down to, what time of day does your client exercise? And then how can we make some suggestions? Well, okay, we'll do this before your workout, this after your workout, and then you're going to head to the office, and this is how you're going to go about your day. And then here's how we might want to deliver the additional doses of protein throughout your meals and snacks, right? In the American diet, we tend to go very, very low on protein until dinner time, and then we have this massive dose. And that's really something I try to, that's a habit I try to encourage my clients and athletes to try to break. And let's distribute those amino acids that we get from protein throughout the entire day. Okay, so hopefully you've done a little bit of math there and figure out what your protein needs might look like. And then that's where that assessment piece comes in. Be like, hey, and sometimes I will ask clients, like, I'm not a huge fan of logging every single thing that they're eating, but I often will ask clients, maybe let's just pay attention to those. Are you hitting that number? Are you distributing it throughout your entire day? Are you noticing? Can we identify that there is a meal or a snack that maybe you are falling really short? And how can we then strategize to figure out how can we easily add some protein through some whole foods to make up for some of those deficits? Another big conversation about protein is about protein quality. That is the terminology used in the literature. A lot of dietitians will use that as well. And really what we're talking about is the provision of essential amino acids. So essential amino acids, vital for muscle protein synthesis. Those branched chain amino acids that everyone's always talking about are just 3 of the 9 essential amino acids that we're trying to seek from food. And we do want to gravitate towards a wide range of both animal and plant-based protein sources. And that's a great way to ensure that we're getting all of our essential amino acids. And that's really what the goal is. So I've given you some examples here. Leucine, again, the coveted leucine as that branched chain amino acid, but really, again, all essential amino acids are really vital for the recovery process. And I've just given you some examples of different types of food, both animal-based and vegetarian-based, of how you can start to piece together to get those essential amino acids and that leucine as part of a post-workout meal or snack, but also considering for your other meals and snacks as well. All right, next up. So that's protein. And don't worry, we're not done with that protein conversation, but now it's time to talk a little bit about carbohydrates and how important they are for recovery. So, and this is probably an area I see people skimp on the most, is that they prioritize protein, especially as part of a recovery meal or snack, and then they neglect the carbs, right? And that can be, and I think, again, I agree that the logic is, let's make sure we get some protein post workout, but carbs and protein work together to optimize and promote that recovery process. So you're really missing an important piece if you're only focusing on protein. So, and this is sort of that replenishment of energy stores is really what a big piece of what the carbohydrates are doing. They also aid in muscle protein synthesis. So they are not isolated. It's not just that the protein is for muscles and the carbs is for energy. It really is a sort of, they serve multiple purposes, but we do want to replenish those glycogen stores. If we look, I won't make you do the math this time, but feel free. But the idea of it's more somewhere about 1 to 1.5 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram body weight. Recommendations will vary. I still look to, especially with collegiate athletes, or again, busy clients that have busy lives and are really just leaving the gym or that workout and they're on to the next thing. I really do try to encourage that they still try to get this recovery meal or snack in close proximity to the end of their workout, for, if anything, just because the day is going to get away from them if they don't, right? And so it's not a bad, we do have data now to say, well, maybe it doesn't need to be like right after exercise. I still think it's a good recommendation that I feel good making, because there's really no downside to prioritizing and making sure we're getting some of those nutrients delivered right away. And then we do expect to see an increase in muscle protein synthesis later on throughout the day after that workout, especially a strength focused workout. So there's a sweet spot there for glycogen repletion, looking at that 1.2, so somewhere right in the middle of that range. And let's face it, it's palatable, it's accessible. I feel like my clients really, they feel some relief when I'm like, yeah, it's okay to eat carbs. Really, like that it's good news, really, really, for everyone. So it's accessible. It's usually pretty easy to eat on the go. We'll look at some examples shortly. Another question I get a lot is, does it have to be whole grain? It depends. So most of the time it could be whole grain, but if it's right before exercise, you want to be a little bit more conservative with that fiber content. And really, it's about what you like, right? If you choose the majority of whole grains and then, you're really not a fan of, whole wheat pasta, well, then don't eat whole wheat pasta and get your whole grains someplace else. It really doesn't have to be an all or nothing. So nice, really a reminder here to not skimp on the carbs, to include them as part of those recovery meals to help with the recovery process and also to help protein do its job. All right, next up, we're going to talk about antioxidants. And I think this is another thing. People are like, oh, I know what antioxidants are, but what do they really do? And here's where we're talking more about that inflammation, right? So we have inflammatory processes are normal. We're going to see an increase in them after exercise. And we want antioxidants to help reduce that oxidative stress. The more we exercise, the more oxidative stress there's going to be. antioxidants come in and they help with the reduction of that. Okay. We look at it even in terms of things called creatine kinase, which is a marker of muscle damage, which again, some damage is okay. Excessive damage, not okay, right? That's going to predispose us to injury. That's going to make our recovery more difficult. So these are the things that we look at, and we know that delivering those antioxidants as part of the recovery meal or snack can actually help with the reduction of some of those inflammatory markers. By just a quick refresher there of vitamins and one mineral that have an antioxidant function. A, C, E, and selenium are vitamins and minerals that also work as antioxidants in the body, and particularly C and E. And this is really interesting to me that sometimes I think people want to take supplements of antioxidants in order to fight that inflammation, but there's good data, especially with vitamin C and E, that talk more about the whole food-based sources of antioxidants and how they have a much, much better effect on reducing inflammation as opposed to supplemental versions. So just another reason to emphasize those whole food options. And then in addition to these vitamins and minerals that have antioxidants, we also see the prevalence of something called polyphenols. And these are really just plant-based compounds with powerful antioxidant properties, right? So they all help in the fight of inflammation. And we're going to look at some food examples as well that are going to deliver those polyphenols to help give us to fight that inflammation. All right, so now we want to put this into practice. A couple more polls coming your way, not quite yet, but in a little while. And I just a reminder here as we sort of now that we've reviewed what recovery really means and how we execute it in terms of food. I welcome you and just remind you if you have questions, just put them in the chat and we will get to them in a little while. But what I decided to do here was like, okay, let's take the carbs and the protein and the antioxidants that we've been talking about, and let's give you 4 tangible examples of foods that help optimize recovery. All right. So first up, we have almonds. 23. I love this picture right here. 23 is a reminder that it's 23 almonds in an ounce. And just about, I mean, for me, it's like a good size handful here. And we're going to look at some research about this as well in a moment. For that one serving of almonds, we're going to get 13 grams of the good, healthy, unsaturated fat and only 1 gram of saturated fat. And then we're going to get a lot of nutrients as well. We're going to get those polyphenols. I teed that up nicely, didn't I? Right. So you're going to get polyphenols, especially in the skins of the almonds. And what a wonderful way to get vitamin E and magnesium as well. So these are really all nutrients well suited to help promote recovery. In addition to that, 6 grams of protein that comes in that 1 ounce / 23 almond serving. Could not be easier. Again, thinking about on the go and how do we come up with some real, tangible, easy practices, especially if we're recovering on our way back to the office or home or school or whatever the case may be. And I'm just offering for all of these 4 examples some ways to love them, right? So whether it's trail mix, adding to oatmeal, overnight oats, salads, energy bites, baked goods, lots of versatility there in terms of what almonds can give us. Really excited to share some of this research with you. So 2 research studies, and as promised, like I said, all the references I'll share at the end of the presentation. In this particular study, we looked at 64 healthy exercising adults, and they had 2 servings of almonds a day for 1 month. And we found that they recovered from exercise sessions better than consuming a cereal bar. So one group we had almonds versus cereal bar for 4 weeks, and we saw some major benefits to recovery here. So we saw that they had reduced feelings of fatigue and tension, increased leg and lower back strength during recovery, right? So we all know that if you don't recover well, that next workout might be problematic. We saw a decrease in that, enhanced recovery post-exercise, reduced fatigue and tension, decreased muscle damage, especially during that first day of recovery, right? Which is usually one of those days where you're going to feel it the most. So nice, real, a proven beneficial benefit of having these almonds. And if we look here at this graph, it's looking at showing that the increase in the gut phenolics, right? So again, those polyphenols being introduced, doing their job, was a nice increase after the 4 weeks of that supplementation. So small study, but powerful, looking at all this data. Okay, so next up, this is brand new. I mean, this is about a month off of publication. So, again, very excited to share the results of this study. This was a sort of similar format where there was 25 study participants and they were mildly overweight and occasional exercisers, right? And they had that same 2 servings, so 2 ounces of almonds per day. And with this particular study, they demonstrated a 25% reduction in muscle soreness while performing this explosive power exercise. So we were looking at what they were capable of doing in recovery phase. So they had a vertical jump challenge, and over that a 72-hour exercise recovery period, there was a 25% reduction in their muscle soreness. So they also had better muscle performance because they felt less sore. So that perceived reduction in soreness translated to better performance, and looking at versus the control group that in this case was given pretzels. And all I've done right here is just shown you a little bit of the nutritional breakdown of what we were getting from the almond group versus the pretzel group, thinking about all those nutrients that we were talking about being delivered from one versus the other. So really exciting research. I really invite you to really go through the entire study and look at the information. I'll share the references afterwards. But yay for almonds. All right. So next up, we are going to talk about eggs. So that was number one. Number two on our sort of top hit list for recovery foods, choosing eggs here. So also accessible, also affordable, good protein option. We're going to get some lutein is another one of those antioxidant delivering nutrients. Vitamin D, of course, important for bone health and muscle health as well. I always remind my clients and athletes to eat the entire egg. So very often we focus just on the white for the protein. There's just as much protein in the white as there is in the yolk. So, and that's where the vitamin D and the lutein are in the yolk. So if we're skipping out on that, we're actually skipping out on half of a big percentage of the nutrients that are available. So eat the whole egg. If you don't like the yolks, fine. But if you do like them and you're skipping them, thinking that you're sort of prioritizing the protein, definitely want to make sure that you include those yolks. Ways to love: skillet sandwiches, snacks, hard cooked egg, again, on the go, can be very easy. Big casserole fan in my house. Again, there's making some make ahead breakfast sandwiches or something like that usually works out pretty well in my house. So really easy, tangible options. Okay, next up, here we're going a little bit more carb centric. So rice, right, as part of a recovery meal, could not be easier. Very good for meal prep, super affordable, digested, usually carries a low risk of allergies. So again, it's kind of just user friendly for everybody. We're going to get carbs, we're going to get fiber, we're going to get magnesium, and just like an easy thing to just heat and go. Fried rice is one of my favorite things to make in my house. It's like, what do I have left in my kitchen? What can I throw together? And I'm not just saying this. Try, if you've not put almonds in your fried rice, you must try it. It just adds that level of crunch, boosts the nutrients a bit too as well. Is a nice little way to make your fried rice a little bit more interesting. And then of course, rice bowls. I mean, I feel like rice bowls are all over the place now, and some casseroles as well. So that's 3 cheers for rice. Okay, so cheating a little bit here by just saying fruits and vegetables as a food, but really, again, because you really can't go wrong no matter which fruit or vegetable you choose. So they're antioxidant rich. I'm like, oh, I'm always here like, oh, I heard blank vegetable or fruit is bad for you. And really, again, you can't go wrong. There's no such thing as a bad fruit or vegetable. Certainly encourage variety. Brightly colored fruits and vegetables is where we're going to get a plentiful amount of those antioxidants that we are looking for. And it really doesn't matter if they're fresh, frozen, canned, dried. They're all going to offer a benefit, and really different benefits depend on the nutrient that the food that we're choosing. A call to action that I will often give my clients and athletes is to aim for, now, again, just trust me on this, Aim for a fruit or vegetable at every meal and snack. And people are immediately freaked out and concerned. But truthfully, it's not as hard as you might think. Again, if we're incorporating, fresh fruit in, as a side, as a snack, frozen fruit in a smoothie or in some oatmeal, canned can be utilized as well. I do a lot of baking or again smoothies with canned fruits and vegetables, or dried. Okay, so dried again in that trail mix that we're taking on the go. Really try to get them towards it. Their baseline might be none of this, right? So anywhere that we can start to inject some of those fruits and vegetables and to help with that antioxidant component, right? Because like, listen, you eat one salad a week, you're not going to get there in terms of that anti-inflammatory benefit. So it needs to be a consistent part. Again, how often do we talk to our clients about consistency? This is no different. So finding tangible, really easy ways to incorporate it, and that reminder that fresh and frozen are just as nutritious is something I think that continues to surprise people. And then how do we do it, right? Smoothies, soup, salads, great dippers for, whatever sort of dip you enjoy. And then of course, sandwiches, not just lettuce and tomato. We can totally think outside the box here. Pasta dishes and things like that as well. All right. So look, now we've looked at recovery, we've looked at foods in isolation. Now just some good old meal and snack ideas. So everything you see here aims to check the boxes of the things that we're talking about. So we'll get protein, we'll get carbs, we get the antioxidants from that colorful produce, and then the fluid piece that I told you I was not going to be able to help myself but include. And really again, like what does our client need? When are they exercising? When do they train? How often are they training? And then what makes most sense for them? All right. Truthfully, for recovery, meals make it a little easier. So it's a lot more likely in a balanced meal that you're going to get everything that you need to satisfy the needs of recovery. Snacks, you just have to try a little bit harder. And that's really how I explain it. So, very, very doable. But I think this is where people might benefit from a little bit more guidance. So, just some examples, right? So, a smoothie, we put some almond milk, some frozen fruit, a protein source in there. We're good to go. Okay. And so really, and again, that's really all the guidance you might have to provide. We're getting fluid, we're getting lots of the nutrients that we discussed today. We're getting easy. We can whip it up and take it with us on the go. Something like a sports drink and a protein bar. Again, none of those are created equal. So, really paying attention to the labels on those different products and what makes most sense for your client or population group that you work with. Good old trail mix and yogurt. Again, that's very something easy that can be made on the go and customized very easily. I like to put the trail mix in my yogurt, but that's just me. Low fat chocolate milk, some sort of ready to drink shake, a sandwich, a half a sandwich can very easily be made ahead of time. And then again, don't forget the power of those 23 almonds. Again, let's go up from there. And again, is it in the trail mix? Is it in the smoothie? Great snack options to help with what we're looking for from a recovery standpoint. And then when we get to meals, again, like everything here is we have a protein source, whether it's plant-based or animal-based, we have some healthy carbohydrates, we have some vegetables, whether it's a rice bowl, a pasta dish, a piece of fish and a sweet potato, and then don't forget that fruit or vegetable addition there, and you're going to check all those recovery boxes pretty easily, right? All right, now it's time for our next poll. Our last two polls are going to be sort of close together. So if we could go ahead and launch that. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about execution, right? So what topic do your clients want to learn most about? What are they asking you about? What did they see on social media that they brought to ask you, right? Do they want tailored meal plans and grocery lists? Are they really just looking for that recovery piece? Do they need tips? Is it the what? Is it the when? Tailored exercise plans or all of the above? So, again, there might be with this audience, we might get a little bit of everything, but let me know what you're thinking. And we're going to talk next about some ways to implement this with the clients that we're looking at. So go ahead and answer that poll and we will share the results when they come in. All the above. Again, that's a good option to have there for you. Okay. So yeah, and I think, there's really no wrong answer here, but looking at these different options, how do we execute this? So I don't know how many of you, spend time on social media, but here's what I thought, maybe whether it's social media or not, and I'll give you some examples. Like, how do we take this communication? A big part of my job as a sports dietitian is taking that science and making it more accessible to someone that maybe doesn't have a science brain, right? Someone that doesn't like to geek out on the science as much as I do. So how do we communicate this information, whether this is a face-to-face conversation, whether this is a social media activation? Here's sort of my top tips um, based on what I've learned. So first of all is, of course, keep it simple. Talking about macronutrients is important, but then, like, let's make sure we're saying here's the foods that you get those macronutrients from. I do make the mistake of thinking, oh, everybody understands this, but you know what? Sometimes they might not, right? So keep it simple. Speak to performance, because again, I think every person that we work with, whatever the population, they want to get better, right? They're coming to you for a reason. They have goals. Those goals are going to vary, but making that connection between how food, especially these whole balanced foods we talked about today, impact their performance, or maybe how the lack of them is negatively impacting their performance, is really what you want to point out to them, right? Again, not in a judgmental way, but making that connection. Be like, hi, yeah, you're run down all the time. You've been sick all the time. Like, you keep showing up at the gym, but you're not fueling any of these workouts and you're not recovering after. Maybe that's part of the problem, right? So it's making that connection between how we eat affects our performance, and then ask, is the way that you're feeling, is it working for you, or is it working against you, right? And what steps can we take to help it work for you in a more productive way, right? And again, sometimes they're going to be a mess and it's going to be all over the place, and sometimes it's maybe just some little fine tuning that's going to need to happen. But I think if we connect it to that performance piece, because all of them want to get better, right? It's just a path of how can we help get them there. All right. Um, Always consider timing. I teach athletic training students, and my athletes are probably sick of me saying this, but I'm never going to stop. Sports nutrition is all about timing, right? So the what is so important. We spend a lot of time talking about the what, but the when is important as well. So are they making time to pack the snack the night before, get the trail mix in the gym bag, have something available to them in the car, in the desk, whatever the case may be? But think about the timing. And then you also have to think about what time of day they exercise, right? So are they an early morning person versus a late evening, afternoon, before work, after work, midday, right? That's gonna influence how they're eating, what they're eating, when they're eating it. So, and sometimes it's not always consistent, right? I mean, I don't know how people get up at 5 a.m. to work out, but a lot of people like that. I am not one of them. But again, like, that becomes a very different conversation about how we fuel that workout and then what that recovery is going to look like than someone that might exercise at the end of their workday or maybe even late into the evening. So again, we want them doing it. We're glad that they're making the time for it, but we might have to adjust some of these conversations based on that time. All right. Talk in terms of whole foods, which I've tried really hard to do today. Hopefully I did a good job. Talk in terms of whole foods and then the nutrients, right? So, really to hear, we flip-flopped a little bit today, but again, if we're talking to people that are really at a more fundamental level, it's like really pointing out what the foods that they should focus on to get them the nutrients that they're looking for. Okay. Or even too, it's like, if we just talk about protein all the time and we're not demonstrating types of protein, and then I feel like we're falling short in making those recommendations. There's the consistency piece. So continually highlighting the importance of consistency, in terms of whether that's showing up for their workouts or prioritizing that recovery meal or snack. And it's really about doing it all the time. Again, that one salad a week, we're not going to get there, right? We have to figure out ways to be more consistent for the long haul to see the outcomes that we're looking for and to help them reach those goals. So, just an example of social media. I do one of the things I have fun doing is posting my recovery meal of the day. So here's just an example of an Instagram post where again I'm saying, and within the caption I go into a little bit more detail. I also indicate that I work out in the morning, not that early morning, but I work out in the morning. So there's definitely going to be some coffee as part of my recovery meal, which is not really an area of emphasis, but because of I want the coffee. But, again, fold some humor into it, give some education. Here's what the food looks like. Here's the execution of how I am checking those boxes. I got the fluid piece, the electrolyte piece, the antioxidant piece. There's my protein and my carbs, right? And so it's one thing to, if I just listed all those things out, I think looking at it in terms of food, I got my eggs. I have some sweet potatoes there with a little bit of kale, or I think that was kale or spinach, mixed in there as well. And by doing that, I'm also leading by example, right? So whether we do, I mean, we know that a lot of people are sort of um imposters out there on Instagram, but again, I think a lot of fitness professionals are really trying to show what they're actually doing, right? So keep it real, lead by example, right? So I think there's some accountability on my part, and I might ask a client or an athlete, like, why don't you share me a picture of your recovery meal of the day? And also too, if I'm consistently talking about this, I want to make sure that I'm leading by example, that you're not going to see, I'm talking about doing this. And then, my athlete is going to hear me the next day being like, oh my God, it's been 6 hours and I haven't eaten. You know what I mean? Like I really try hard in my practice not to do that. Again, of course, the one-off, we have crazy days that might get away from us, but I think, our clients take notice of what our habits are, and that makes a difference to them. So that's just something that you want to keep in mind. Okay, so we're wrapping up here on time. We have one more poll for you before we get to our Q&A. And so we're going to launch that right now, and then we will hopefully answer some of your questions. So our poll number 3 is about nutrition advice. Do clients and other audiences, so whether that's social media or however people engage with you, do they often ask you for nutrition advice? I bet I know the answer to this, but I'm really curious to see what you're exposed to. So yes or no? Are they asking you, whether in person or virtually, about nutrition? Let's see what y'all have to say. And then when all the results come in, that we are going to share it. And then I look forward to taking your questions. All right. So yes. So okay. So again, so about an 80-20 split here. And again, I think across the healthcare system, we do see a lot of that where people are asking questions about nutrition, and things in that nature. So thank you so much for participating in those polls. If you want more information about or research, there's a QR code right here. There's my contact information. There's California Almonds information. I'll leave this up, and then I'm going to switch over to my references so you could screenshot those as well. And then I'm ready to take your questions. Hopefully, we have some in the Q&A.
All right. Thank you so much, Dana. So yeah, if anyone has any other questions, go ahead and submit those. We do have a couple here. So someone asked, what do you think is the most important thing about exercise recovery?
Okay, so I mean, it's hard to pick just one, but I think consistency. I think being awareness and finding ways to do it. Because again, if your default is not participating in good recovery meals and snacks, it's going to have such a negative impact on your performance, and it's not going to take very long. So back to the consistency piece. Again, it's not always about perfection, but making the effort and saying, okay, like I'm pretty good at eating, but there's not enough protein. Like really identifying what areas you need to work on and working towards that, but doing it as consistently as possible for sure.
Okay, perfect. And then we also have, what is the most important nutrient clients should consider for recovery and why?
So I'm gonna say again, they're all important. I'm gonna say protein because again, I think that's where most people get it wrong. You know what I mean? It's too much, it's too little, it's not at all. You know what I mean? So if I had to pick one, I would say that needs more consideration. It would probably be how they execute the protein intake. And I'm gonna sneak in not to skip the carbs either, because I already said that, but I think they're really both important. But again, I think that protein piece, and hopefully I've given some real, like, practical, tangible ways in order to help execute that. Because, like I said, we do see a lot of people load up on protein just at one meal of the day, which is almost always dinner. And, if they're exercising much earlier in the day, that's really something that they wanna try to fix.
And this is a good question. Can I use whole almonds, almond milk, or almond butter?
So, I mean, I love almonds any way that I can get them. So, yes, I mean, I would say I tried to give you some examples of those different ways, whether it's in a smoothie or something like that. So, the research that I shared, and here the references, I'll go ahead and put these right here. That research was done with whole almonds. As you look into those studies, you'll see that it was based on those 2 ounce portions of the almonds for the duration of the study. But I would say go for those almonds however you enjoy them, however you want to get them.
All right. It looks like those are all the questions that we have. Dana, is there anything else that you'd like to share?
No, I would just say, again, here's those references if you want to take a screenshot and take a closer look at the information that's here. And then I will just go back before I leave you guys to share this in terms of the QR code where you can get more research, and I invite you all to engage on social media and check out California Almonds resources as well.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. And thank you, Dana, so much for all of your time and expertise. And that's it.
Thank you guys. Thanks. Have a great day.